Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Hope you're doing well, everyone. Before I start this video, just to remind you that if you're interested in my book, the links are down below, Amazon links. If you're into Kafka, Dostoevsky, Albert Camus, other existential psychologists, please take a look at it. Thank you for your support. Well, in this video, and I want to apologize first of all because the weather has been very bad recently, and or rather I should say very dark, and so I have not really had the opportunity to record a video last weekend. I'm recording a video today, but the lighting might not be ideal, so apologies in advance if that's the case. As you might have noticed, I titled this video provocatively. I said INFJ most misunderstood type. Now, the reason why I chose that title is because I'm actually really thinking at the moment that there is a simple way of determining why INFJs could be the most misunderstood type, and that is that the INFJ don't even understand themselves. So it's complicated, to claim to not be the most misunderstood type, because this is not like a badge of honor or a badge of pride or anything. But it's hard, to argue against that when you, among the different people that could possibly understand you, you yourself are excluded from that group. And I think that's why in many ways the INFJ beats the anticipated competitor, the INFP, for this most misunderstood type, because I think that these are probably the two types, that maybe with the ENFP as well, that are the most likely to feel misunderstood. But I think that I'm going to side with INFJ on this one, having thought about it. And of course, I can try to give you a little bit of an argument for it. I think that the reason why the INFJ is the most misunderstood type, or is the type that feels the most misunderstood, it's not quite the same thing as being the most misunderstood type, because I think that no type is the most misunderstood in a sense. To be misunderstood is a fact of life. You could be misunderstood in such certain situations. You can be in a job where you are misunderstood a lot of the time, and that's a very difficult situation to be in. But it's different from feeling misunderstood. You are unlikely to feel misunderstood if you are understood. It's possible, but it's a bit unlikely. What's much more likely is to feel misunderstood when you are, at least according to certain measures, understood. People understand what you're saying. You simply don't quite feel that you're completely understood. And I think that feeling is particularly acute with the INFJ type. The reason why I think that the INFP type is not quite as badly equipped is because at the end of the day, they have a strong extroverted perceiving function, extroverted intuition, which keeps them in touch with the outside world. That's an important element of feeling like you're in touch with the world, because from the moment that you feel that you're in touch with the world in some way, even if it's not through sensing, you are opening the gates to the possibility of being understood. And the second aspect of this is that INFPs are dominant FI users, and FI will always have strong potential to make an INFP or an ISFP feel that they alone really completely understand themselves and so on, and maybe place a certain amount of importance on that. Perhaps it's important to them to feel that they understand themselves better than anybody else understands them, and sometimes when people read them, it can be uncomfortable to them, as it can be for a lot of FI users. Now, the difference here is that in the case of the INFP, well, at least they have themselves that they can securely feel they understand, and you could apply this argument to the ENFP as well by reversing the top functions. So they'll have extroverted perception, strong connection with the outside world. Again, not via sensing, but nevertheless perception, and an objective perception, and the introverted feeling, which can be quite strong with the NFPs and will more or less convey to them the same sense that that INFPs feel about their FI and their understanding of themselves, but they're a bit less likely to feel misunderstood, I think, because their extroversion is stronger, and because their dominant function is actually extroverted, and it's a self to world function. The FI function is a world to self function, but again, at least they can have themselves to rely on for self understanding. Now, the situation of the INFJ is different because I do not know of any type that is so weak when it comes to sensing functions. Like SI is their demon function, I believe it's called among the shadow functions. So it's the 8th slot. So you can pretty much forget about SI being strong in an INFJ. And their SE can get better with time and experience as they get older, but it's still always going to be an inferior function. If you want to ask yourself, can an INFJ's FE be reliably good all the time? Well, think about an INTP's FE, and you realize that inferior FE in an INTP can mature, certainly, but it's not like an INTP will ever be a master of FE. Well, it's the same for the INFJ's SE. So if you like, you have a sensing function which is it's an introverted sensing function which is demon function, like the lowest of the shadow functions, and in the main stack the extroverted sensing function is inferior. So essentially the INFJ has relatively weak and, so to speak, immature sensing functions. So the relationship with the real world there is curtailed to an extent, because that also means that in terms of extrovert perception, it's all the domain of the inferior function world, and then in terms of the introverted perception, of course, it's very strong, but it's a world to self function. So they can be at home in their perception, just in the same way that the INFP is at home in their feeling, through FI, and for the INFJs through NI. The problem is, well, introverted intuition is not like introverted feeling. So whereas introverted feeling can give you a strong sense of not just a sense of self, but understanding yourself, having a solid grasp of who you are and your self-identity. That's not what an introverted intuition gives you. What introverted intuition provides can be fed into your sense of self, but it is not in and of itself something that will provide you with an internal judgment as to what your self is. It's a perceiving function. So in the same way, the extroverted intuition in an ENFP will, it will not particularly on its own suffice for developing a sense of self. It will provide a lot of raw material, but introverted feeling will make judgments based on that. Now, in the case of the INFJ, what you have is, if you accept the inferior function, which again, like we said, is never very strong, despite what some INFJs seem to think. You're the only sort of like self to world function that is very strong in the INFJ is FE, and the problem with FE is that it is not actually a very good function for finding ground in your sense of self. Simply because it's an objective function, sure, but it's an objective feeling function, which means that you're always struggling a little bit between finding out what is your own judgment and what among your judgments are just reinterpretations of the judgments of others. And of course that is difficult because it can alienate you from a sense of self at the very same time as you are trying to develop it. Which leads me to my last point, which is that there are a lot of INFJ type 4. And you might ask yourself, when I say type 4, I mean Enneagram 4. And you might ask yourself, how come there's, INFJ type 4? It seems like a quintessential FI function, FI type, so are there so many INFJ type 4? They should have strong FI. and therefore they should have a strong sense of self. At least the INFJ type 4 should have a strong sense of self. So my argument is that INFJ type 4, in some way, in some interpretation, they have a strong sense of self, but that is not equivalent to the idea that they can understand themselves well. So I think that if there's any takeaway from this video that you should try to bring back home, it's that being a type 4 can mean having a strong sense of self and individuality. It doesn't mean that you understand yourself easily. Okay? There's the approach to cultivating a strong sense of self by, having a strong awareness of what it is and fighting for that. And considering that it is paramount in the way you conduct yourself and how you deal with the others and the world in general. And then there's like the other approach to having a sense of self, which is that you're constantly trying to find out what that sense of self is, because you're always alienated from it. And that's the INFJ type 4 for you. To some extent, it's the INFJs as a whole. It's like, yes, there's a preoccupation with self, but it's not a preoccupation based on the cultivation of what you know and what you securely know. It's a strong sense, it's a strong sense of self in some way based on the constant preoccupation and questioning and exploration of what that self is. So in one case you cultivate, in the other case you explore, okay? And that's not the same thing. And in the second case, a lot of misunderstanding can happen, including from the point of view of the INFJ themselves, because they are not functionally very well equipped to reach a final judgment. And so this constant sense of self-alienation applies very much to an INFJ type 4, for example, but it also only serves to emphasize this feeling of being misunderstood. Because in a sense, the only thing that understands you is the objective, abstract, FE world. Nobody in particular. Alright, enjoy your time, guys, and I will see you soon. Let me know in the comments if you find that useful. Ciao!